My white sister called me the N-word on the way to a concert, so I turned around and took her home. The concert was her birthday present. I paid for both tickets. $400 I had been saving since August. She didn't speak for the entire drive back. She cried for 30 of the 42 minutes. I didn't say a word either. My dad, Bennett, is black. He married Kelsey's mom, Janet, when I was 10. Janet is white. Kelsey is white. Kelsey has been my stepsister for 9 years. We share a bathroom. We share holidays. We share a father figure because my dad has been more of a dad to Kelsey than her biological father ever was. He taught her to drive. He paid for her braces. He went to every one of her volleyball games, including the ones I had track meets on the same day. I never said anything about that. There are things you learn not to count in a blended family if you want it to survive. Kelsey and I were close once. When she was 13 and I was 15, we stayed up until 2 a.m. watching movies. She braided my hair once, badly. She asked me how to pronounce words she heard in songs, and I listened. Then she got to high school, and the version of Kelsey who asked me how to say things correctly became a version who stopped asking and started assuming. I heard her on the phone with her friends once using the word casually. The door was open. She saw me. She stopped. She didn't apologize. She closed the door. I told my dad. He said, "I'll talk to her." 2 weeks later, I heard her say it again. Same friends, same door. This time it was already closed. She just wasn't as quiet as she thought. I didn't tell my dad the second time. I knew what "I'll handle it" meant. It meant he would choose the house over the word because the house was where his marriage lived, and the word was something he had been swallowing in different rooms with different people for years. The concert was last Saturday. Kelsey's birthday is next week, but the show was Saturday, so I gave her the tickets early. She screamed. She hugged me. She posted a photo and tagged me. Best sister ever. We got in my car at 6 p.m. She connected her phone to the Bluetooth. The fourth song had the word in the chorus. She sang every lyric. She didn't skip it. She didn't mumble it. Full voice. I turned the music down. I said, "Skip the word." She said, "It's just a song." I said, "Skip the word, Kelsey." She rolled her eyes. She said, "You're being so dramatic. Everyone says it." I said, "You're in my car. Skip the word." She was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she looked at me and said it. Not in the song. To me. She said, "You're acting like such a..." And she said the full word. Hard R. Looking directly at my face. In the passenger seat of a car I paid for. On the way to a concert I bought her. 9 years into a family my father built around her. I indicated right. I took the next exit. She said, "What are you doing?" I pulled onto the highway going the other direction. She said, "You're going to ruin my birthday because of one word?" I drove 42 minutes in silence. She cried. She called her mom from the car. When I pulled into the driveway, Kelsey got out and slammed the door hard enough to shake the mirrors. I went inside. Janet was in the kitchen. She said, "That was cruel. She's a child. It's her birthday weekend." I said, "She called me the N-word." Janet said, "She was singing a song. You overreacted." I said, "She wasn't singing when she said it the second time." She looked at me and said it to my face. Janet said, "Well, maybe if you didn't make everything about race, your sister wouldn't feel like she has to walk on eggshells around you." My dad walked in during that sentence. He heard it. He looked at Janet. He looked at me. He said, "Everyone needs to calm down." I stared at him. He said, "We'll talk about it tomorrow when everyone's cooled off." I went to my room. I texted my grandmother Meredith, my dad's mother. She answered immediately. She said, "Tell me everything." I told her. Then she said, "Baby, I need you to come to my house tomorrow. Don't tell your father. There are things about that household you need to see." She said, "Janet's mother sent your father a letter when they got engaged. I have kept it for 9 years. I think it's time you read it." I drove to Meredith's house the next morning. She put the letter on the kitchen table. She said, "Your father has never seen this. Janet's mother Wendy sent it to me. She assumed I would show it to him and stop the wedding." 3 handwritten pages. I am not going to write what the letter said because some sentences are too ugly to put in a video. I will say only that Wendy used the word Kelsey used in my car. She used it 14 times in 3 pages. She was describing what my father was, what I was, what our family was going to do to her daughter and her granddaughter. There was a second note tucked inside. It asked Meredith to do the right thing and let him go before those children get hurt. Those children. I was 10 years old and a woman I had never met was writing about me like I was a threat. I said, "Why didn't you show this to my dad before the wedding?" Meredith said, "Because he was happy. Because I thought Janet was different from her mother. Because I was wrong. And I have been living with that for 9 years." She wasn't handing me this letter because she wanted drama. She was handing it to me because nobody else in this family was ever going to say the truth out loud. That evening I found Bennett alone in the garage. I said, "I need to talk to you and I need you to actually listen this time." I told him about the letter, what Wendy wrote, the word used 14 times, the second note. Bennett sat down on the workbench, not like he chose to sit, like his legs gave out. He said, "When?" I said, 9 years ago, 3 weeks before you married Janet." He looked up at me and his first response was, "Your grandmother had no right to put this on you." I felt the air leave my chest. I said, "Your mother-in-law called you and me the N-word 14 times and you're mad at Grandma?" He said, "Wendy has been in our house. She's been at Christmases. She's been good to Kelsey." I said, "She's been good to Kelsey because Kelsey is white. That's the whole point." He said, "Let me think about this. Don't show Janet. Let me figure out how to handle it." Handle it. The same 2 words, the exact same words from months ago when I told him Kelsey was using the word with her friends, and nothing happened after that either. I said, "Okay, Dad." Something closed inside me, not with a slam, a lock clicking quietly into place. Friday morning, Janet was in the kitchen. She walked in with that rehearsed warmth. She said, "I spoke to your father. He told me you've been upset. Kelsey shouldn't have used that word, but canceling her birthday experience was a punishment that didn't fit the crime." I caught it. She said, "Your father told me you've been upset, not your father told me about the letter." Bennett took the biggest piece of information he had received in 9 years, that his mother-in-law used that word 14 times to try to stop his wedding, and he turned it into, "She's upset." He didn't address the problem. He managed me. He made me the issue. Again. I said, "Did Dad tell you anything else?" A small crease between Janet's eyebrows. "Like what?" Bennett buried it. "He chose the house." Again. Janet said, "Kelsey's birthday is Sunday. It would mean a lot to your father if we could all be in a good place." I said, "Sure, Sunday works." I was going to bring the letter to Kelsey's birthday dinner. Not because I wanted to ruin her birthday, because every person in this house had been given a chance to do the right thing and not one of them took it. Sunday morning my phone rang at 8:15. Kelsey. She never calls. Her entire life happens through text messages. She said, "Can we talk before dinner?" Her voice was small. She said, "I know what I said in the car was bad. I know you're not going to forgive me just because I say sorry, but I've been thinking about it every single day and I feel sick about it." She said, "My friends say it. I hear it everywhere. I know that's not an excuse. I just never thought about what it actually meant until you turned that car around and didn't say a single word for 42 minutes. That silence was worse than anything you could have said to me." Then she said, "Mom told me you overreacted and Dad told me to give you space and nobody actually said what I did was wrong. I figured that out on my own this week. Nobody told me. I just kept replaying it. That hit me in a place I wasn't ready for." Janet told her she overreacted. Bennett told her to give me space. Two adults had a chance to sit a 17-year-old girl down and say, "What you did was racist and it was wrong," and neither of them did it. They gave her comfortable exits. And Kelsey, on her own, without anyone guiding her there, walked herself to the door that said, "I messed up," and she knocked on it. That mattered. But the letter was not about Kelsey. The letter was about Wendy and the ground this family was planted in. Kelsey's apology did not undo what Wendy put on paper. It didn't undo Janet in the kitchen. It didn't undo Bennett on the workbench saying, "I'll handle it one more time before handling nothing." Kelsey was 17. The adults owed me more than a teenager who figured things out on her own because nobody bothered to teach her. I said, "There's something bigger happening at dinner tonight and I need you to be ready for it." She said, "You're scaring me." I said, "This family has been lying to itself for a long time and I'm done being the only one who sees it." I got dressed. I put the envelope with the original letter in my bag. I called Meredith. She said, "I'll be there. It's time." She said, "Baby, I have been carrying that letter like a stone in my pocket for 9 years. I should have put it down before there was a 17-year-old girl in your car saying the same words her grandmother put in writing." The line between Wendy's letter and Kelsey's mouth was straight and clear, and nobody in this family wanted to trace it. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. Balloons tied to Kelsey's chair, cake on the counter with her name in purple frosting, and Wendy's voice, coming through the phone propped up on speakerphone, singing happy birthday. Warm, sweet, the kind of voice you would hear and think, "That's a good grandmother." That voice wrote those words. That voice used it 14 times. And here she was singing through a speaker sounding like love, sounding like someone who had never put hate on paper in her life. Wendy to Kelsey, the letter to the car, 9 years apart and the same word connecting them like a thread nobody wanted to see. Meredith was already seated at the table. She gave me a single small nod. She was wearing her church blouse. Bennett walked in and stopped when he saw his mother. He said, "Mom, I didn't know you were coming." Meredith said, "Your daughter invited me." Bennett's eyes moved from Meredith to me. His face changed. He knew something was happening. He said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I sat down. I set the envelope on the table next to my plate. I said, "After dinner." Janet came in carrying the chicken. She said something about how nice it was to have everyone together. For a few minutes it was small talk. Then Janet smiled around the table and said, "This is so nice." I set my fork down. I said, "Janet, when I told you Kelsey called me the N-word, you said I make everything about race. Do you still believe that?" The table went silent. Janet's smile disappeared. She said, "I think we agreed to move past that." I said, "No, you talked." I listened. Then I waited to see if anyone in this house would do something. Nobody did. Janet said, "I think you're sensitive and sometimes that sensitivity makes things harder than they need to be." I said, "Okay, I want to read you something." I picked up the envelope. Bennett stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. He said, "Don't." I looked at him. I said, "You had 5 days. You told Janet I was upset. You didn't tell her about the letter. You didn't tell her what her mother wrote. You chose the house again. You always choose the house." His eyes were wet. He said, "I was trying to protect this family." I said, "You were protecting everyone except me." I opened the envelope. Meredith said, "Bennett, sit down and let your daughter speak. You have been telling that girl it's not the time for 19 years. I read portions of the letter out loud. Wendy's name, the date, the word, the sentence where Wendy described what I would become growing up in a mixed household. Then I read the closing line. If you love your son, you will stop this before that woman and that child ruin everything your family built." I looked up. I said, "That child was me. I was 10. Janet's face went white. She said, "Where did you get that?" Meredith said, "Your mother sent it to me 3 weeks before the wedding. I kept it because I thought you were different from her." I am sitting in this kitchen 9 years later listening to you tell my granddaughter she makes everything about race and I am no longer sure you are different. Janet said, "My mother would never," and then she stopped because she recognized the handwriting. She said, "That was 9 years ago. She has been nothing but kind to this family." I said, "She has been kind to the white members of this family. She has never once sent me a birthday card. She has never once asked about my grades. And now her granddaughter is using the same word she wrote 14 times in a letter trying to stop this family from existing." Then Wendy's voice came through the phone that was still on speakerphone from the birthday song, shaking. She said, "Janet, I can explain." She heard everything. She didn't deny it. Kelsey stood up, tears running down her face. She looked at Janet and said, "You told me she overreacted. You told me it wasn't a big deal. Grandma wrote that, and you told me it was just a word." Janet said, "Kelsey, sit down." Kelsey said, "No, she's my sister. She bought me concert tickets and I called her that word and you told me she was the problem." She turned to me. She said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was this deep." Bennett had not spoken since the letter was read. Meredith turned to him. She said, "Your daughter read that letter out loud at 19 years old. She did what you and I should have done 9 years ago. The least you can do is say something." Bennett's voice cracked. He said, "I heard Janet say that to you in the kitchen on Saturday. I heard it. And I told everyone to calm down because I didn't know what else to do. I have been not knowing what to do for so long that I forgot I was supposed to be doing something." He turned to Janet. He said, "Your mother wrote that about my daughter. And you just told my daughter she makes everything about race. In what world is that okay?" Janet said, "I didn't know about the letter." Bennett said, "You didn't need the letter. You heard what Kelsey said in the car. You heard yourself in the kitchen. The letter just proves it's been here longer than any of us wanted to admit." I said, "I want you to say my name, not your stepdaughter. My name. And I want you to say that what happened in the car was racist. Not dramatic, not sensitive, racist." The silence went on a long time. Wendy breathing through the speaker, the clock in the living room. Then Janet said my name, and she said, "What Kelsey said to you was wrong, and what I said to you was wrong. wrong, and I need to call my mother and have a conversation I should have had 20 years ago. I drove Meredith home that night. We sat in her driveway with the engine off. She said, I should have given him that letter 9 years ago. I said, he might not have been ready to read it 9 years ago. She held my hand and said, you are stronger than every adult in that house. Don't you ever let them make you feel like you're too much. Later that night, Kelsey texted me, I don't want the concert tickets. I don't deserve them. But if you ever want to go to a concert together, I'll buy the tickets next time, and I'll earn it. I typed, we'll see. It was not forgiveness. It was a door I was choosing not to lock. And for the first time in 9 years, I was the one deciding whether it opens. Bennett called the next morning. He did not say, I'll handle it. He said, I'm sorry I made you carry that alone. I'm talking to Janet today, and I'm calling Wendy myself. I said, okay. I did not say it was fine. I did not say I forgave him. Things were not fixed. The word still happened. The letter still existed. The 9 years of silence still passed. But for the first time, I was not the only one in the family willing to say what was true out loud, and that was where it started.